Laurel.mchargue. And today I have with me an old friend who goes way back. Let's see, where did I meet
Be
you,
careful
Roger?
about way back.
Way back in old, right?
Yes,
Roger, I met you back when I lived in Leadville, when we lived in Leadville,
right.
back in the day. And
I think about 2010, 2012, somewhere around in there.
a
And
few
you,
years ago.
yeah, you started a writing club, and was it would meet at that it's the Victorian house you had in Leadville, and that's when that was.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. And
It was.
we
It was.
reconnected recently, and you sent me a couple of your books, one of them being Laments for the Dead, which we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about some of your other work too. But so I started reading Laments for the Dead, and in the first chapter I read, I thought, I've read this before. So I think you might have started that during our writing group.
I could have at that time because we were sharing just, tidbits of our writing at that time. So,
Yeah, and so I immediately was again drawn in. So give our listeners out there a what we call an elevator pitch, which is a really brief summary of what they're going to find in this.
okay. Um, It begins with a nuclear explosion at a power plant in northern the Soviet Union at the time. If I say Russia instead of the Soviet Union, so the explosion takes place in 1985 at the height of the Cold War, and a grandmother, a mother of a worker, her daughter is working at that power plant,
Yeah.
and she has taken the mother's son to visit her mother, and they have left, and they're, I don't know, 70 miles away, 60 miles away when the explosion occurs. And the grandmother and the grandson are having a little bit of picnic before they make the final trek back home. And immediately she realizes that something terrible has happened. And the book talks about how or this grandmother or mother is trying to reclaim her daughter.
Yeah.
And the little boy is, you have to read the book to see what his thoughts are, but he wants to also reclaim his mother. And he thinks that there's this man in America who might know who that is. Um, and it moves from northern Russia, Soviet Union, to near Buena Vista, Colorado.
Yeah.
And there is a man there that they will eventually discover, but more what they discover earlier is a man who works for the government who's a nuclear expert, and he helps guide them to find what they're looking for in a sense. But it's a story of a mother trying to reclaim her daughter, of a son trying to reclaim his mother, and of a nuclear expert trying to reclaim whatever that is or
And
help
there's
them
a
reclaim it.
secret.
There
There's
is, and
there's a
you can't tell
yeah.
all thing all of that.
No, no, we're not going to talk about that. But so what genre is this? I read on the
That's
back.
um, as I just mentioned to you or talked to you. Most of what I do is boomer lit. It has an issue that is involved with um, the time period after World War II, and for me, basically the 1950s up to the turn of the century. And this one, as I said, is the Cold War. Right at the height of the Cold War when President Reagan was trying to decide if it was the evil empire and if there was any way to work with them. You have this nuclear explosion, and you don't know the reason for it at the time, um, which is part of it. But my other books also have social issues, whether it's a desegregation of Denver schools in the early 1970s, or whether it's school violence, um, whether it's the movement of refugees across the line, across the southern border. So there's always something. And then I've got a set of books that, for lack of a better term, is women's or ladies basketball genre, which focuses on, yes, which focuses
On
on
point.
um, how women and girls had to struggle to find uh, playing time and resources in public schools, especially in small towns. On Point has a made-up city of Oro Hills, and Oro Hills looks a lot like Leadville, Colorado. So,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
I understand women's struggling to find their way in lots of places. Being
Yes,
one of the
yes.
first women at West Point myself, I understand
I
uh,
think that's going on
some of
again
those.
today, that you have
I
to be concerned about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Laments for the Dead. It opens with this really, really beautiful scene with the young boy. Pronounce his name. It's like Piotr.
It's Peter. It's
Peter.
really how you pronounce that is Peter. And I've had
Peter.
a
Okay.
number of readers who say, "How?
Hi.
What is that?" Yeah, but it's just Peter.
Just
So
Peter. So Peter is has a connection, a deep connection with nature and with animals. I'll just say
yes,
that. And then the juxtaposition between the beauty and the violence is stunning. I mean, it really draws you in right away. And then of course, Olga, the grandmother, feeling like sensing her daughter Ursula, who's working at this place. So, why was it important for you to include Korean War soldiers in this?
um,
You're first of all, let me tell everyone you are a historian or an historian.
yes.
Yes.
It's that consonant, but it has a vowel sound, and so you just either seems to work. And
Good.
as if you write fiction, you can make up your own grammar and punctuation rules. You can
Yes.
have quotation marks if you want to, or
Yeah.
not.
Do whatever
Make
you
them up
want.
as you go along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the
Um,
Korean War element. Um,
the second book I wrote, and this was about the fourth book I wrote, Laments for the Dead, I think,
okay.
and out of 10. But the second book I wrote was called Other Lives, and it's the one out of the 11 that I've written that has not been published. It didn't quite work, but I loved my character, Walt Kramer,
Yeah.
and because he was a problem solver.
Yeah.
And so he fit right into this, that as the story moves along, somebody has to help to solve this problem.
Mhm.
And because he has a nuclear background, um, and because Peter is, uh, I don't know the right word for it, but he senses that there might be something there.
Yeah.
And so this Korean War veteran who, in the original book, wasn't very proud of his service early on.
Yeah.
Uh, he was there at the beginning of the Korean War, and that was a cluster F
Hmm.
at the
Hmm.
beginning.
Yeah.
But there was a number of people who stood there, soldiers who stood their ground and allowed for the American troops to reconstitute themselves at Pusan and
Yeah.
the peninsula and then move forward. But anyway, he becomes a man obsessed with correcting his failures in Korea. And so he's living in Buena Vista. And again, that other book would explain a little bit, although this one does begin to explain some of the
Yeah.
things if you
It
get
does.
later on. But that's
Yeah.
that's how he becomes a part of this story. So
Okay. Why did you not publish the other one?
because it didn't work for the whole book, um, I just had some questions about it, some concerns about it, and because I wasn't proud of it, I guess, saying the whole thing is really good, I have not put it out there. Will I sometime? Probably not, because Laments for the Dead has the important part about his um, how he how his stepfather or stepfather or his father-in-law, excuse me, how his father-in-law helps him get out of some of his doldrums, out in
Yeah.
his guilt. So
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me why you write. Why do you write anyway? I mean, again, you obviously write in several genres. Why? What
I
makes you
started
write?
writing. Yeah, I started writing in 2003, and I think that I always had an idea that I would write at some point. But at 2003, I was just finishing 30 years of teaching, and I absolutely loved my teaching, and I truly had America's greatest teaching assignment. I taught uh, advanced placement U.S. history,
Oh,
international baccalaureate history, and one and a class on current events for seniors who had to take the class to graduate. But seniors are pretty much into current events a little bit. And so that was my schedule. And
yeah.
so I had a great schedule. I was also coaching basketball, and Greeley is a town that loves its basketball, and so there's talent that runs through there, and so that was a pretty good gig too.
Yeah.
Um, but I had this character. Um, his name was Paul Gary, in running it through my head, and he'd been running it through my head for about 5 years, and it was time to put him on paper. And what I retired for was to see if I could write, because I wanted to, but I wanted to see if I could. And between May or June of 2003 and uh, March of 2004, I started researching a story. I went to Boulder. I drove to Boulder 2 days a week and spent 8 hours a day in the Boulder Library researching to write this story, which actually this book just came out on the 10th, a couple of days ago. It's the first one I wrote, but it's 20 years in the making. But anyway, um, I wrote, and what I found out is that I could write, but I didn't care to promote very much. So I've been writing, and I write almost every day. I don't have writer's block. Um, Out of 365 days a year, I write 350 of them or
Oh
edit
man, I
every day.
wish.
And again, it's my morning hobby. It's what I do. But if I miss the morning, I'll write sometime during the day or in the evening to catch up on it. But it's just something that I've wanted to do and have had a couple of people along the way tell me, you should try that. I think you can do that. Plus, I love to research. The research for me is fun. Laments, are these sayings from the people in northern Soviet Union, northern Russia, who are um, a little different than normal Russians, and so
Yeah,
they're yeah.
when you research again, and as an historian, you must love to research. When do you know that you've done enough?
That's a good question. Um, when it fits the story, basically, when I get to the point where, yeah, that's how I can continue with this story here. Now, you know as well as I do that when you finish a book, there's always things, and especially after people have talked to you a little bit, you go, I could have done that a little differently. But when you finally finish, it's time to put it away and start on something else. Um, and that's what I do. But the research can consume me at times, and it's great. I really do enjoy that.
So you took me back in this book. You have information about Chernobyl, 1986, 3 Mile Island, and 1979, 3 Mile Island. I have to laugh a little bit, not that it's funny, but my husband will frequently ask me if my family grew up on 3 Mile Island because of some of the issues that we have. Out of the five of us girls, we all have things going on. But anyway, yeah, 3 Mile Island. And then you found evidently, is it Yamato Mountain?
Yamantov.
Yamatov
You can
Mountain?
pronounce it Yamantov or Yamanto. And
Okay.
I there's two things about that. My cat just wants to join in the
Oh, good. Oh, good. Hi.
anyway. Um,
How did you find that as something to use for the purposes of Laments for the Dead?
During the Cold War, and it had continued past the Cold War, the Soviet Union was creating an underground city that would that would survive a nuclear blast. It exists, but it's not where I put it. So I moved it to the northern Ural Mountains, where Siberia is, in the Siberian area, where many of the prisoners of the Soviets in the 1930s and 1940s were sent. But
Yeah.
but Yamantau exists as an underground city, and so I just kind of moved it up to um, above the Arctic Circle.
hmm I had to look that one up because I had not heard of it before. And yeah, evidently people are still wondering what's going on under there,
The
right?
question, yeah, and the United States has underground facilities that are supposedly um, safe from a nuclear explosion, whether it's Cheyenne Mountain or whatever.
Oh, hello, hello. What's your cat's name?
Riva, it's a French name for river, Riva.
Riva, very nice. All right, so you have a lot going on in here. Sam is a main character, and I can say he's gone AWOL, and he has his own demons to deal with. And he feels like, and I'm wondering where you got this. He feels like he has this female spirit in him, and he names the spirit Ursa. Oh, baby bear, right?
Baby bear.
Baby
Yeah.
bear. And of course, that brings to mind. Peter's mother's name is Ursula, and you've got the Ursa
Well,
with the.
Yes. Um, and you caught that you know that Ursa and Bear were similar there. Yeah. The Sam isn't, as I said, there's things you'd like to do with your book differently. Um, After I wrote Laments for the Dead, I wrote another book a little later here.
What's the name? What's the title there?
That's called the Y intersection, and it's about moving people across the border or protecting people whose identities who want their identity kept.
The YWHY intersection.
Y is a tiny city or tiny town in southwestern Arizona. It originally was just the letter Y because the intersection formed a Y, but then the post office said, we can't give you a post office with just an initial. You have to have at least 3 letters in your town's name. And so they just named it Y. Um, and, but Sam will show up again, and that gives away a little bit, but it's how if I would reformat Laments for the Dead, I would take a little bit out of the ending of the Y intersection because Sam plays a very small part of that. Well, that's not true, but not the major part of that, and kind of add it to the end of Laments for the Dead. I had a couple of readers who suggested that for them, it might be a more satisfying ending. Other people said, nope, don't change a thing about Laments. It's just fine the way it is. So,
All right, we'll get to that in a little bit. I want to
okay.
know how you plotted this because it is very intricate and there are many characters whose lives intertwine. Sam is being both hunted and helped, right?
Yes, yes.
And so how did you plot this? I'm guessing that you didn't just, write this by the seat of your pants.
You'd be wrong.
Oh,
I
no.
don't, I do not outline a book. I do not plot a book.
You're
I let the
kidding.
characters go. I let the characters take me where, or take the book where don't know where it is. Um, I haven't, out of all of my books, I have never wrote to an ending except for my very first one.
You're kidding
Um,
me.
I'm kidding. And this is the longest one. This one I wrote, like I said, between
Let's
my
let's let's
first
see the
draft,
title. What's the title?
called The Hill 63. And the reason for
Okay.
that is it's set in Boulder back in 1967.
67, The Hill 67. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and it's the only book I wrote by hand. When I wrote it, it was 160,000 words.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it's been cut down. And I won't talk about it on this interview, but I'll tell you some about the book backstory of this book and why it didn't get published and some other reasons. But it's the only one. I wrote a letter from one person to another person after the fact who were in the book. And I wrote to that letter about what they were doing 20 years after or 30 years after the story itself.
Okay.
And so I had to write the story to that. But that's the only one that I don't write by the seat of my pants.
Oh
The
my
rest
gosh.
of them, I just grab a character that I like or some story, and here we go.
That is very surprising. So, all right. So you decided that in Laments for the Dead, the young boy Peter is prescient,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Do you believe in ESP? Extrasensory perception?
not really. But the a part of that is that I was driving my wife. I had driven my wife over to Frisco to catch the shuttle so she could catch an airplane. And I'm driving back at night. And you know how the roads are between Buena Vista and
I
Climax. There's
do.
a lot
I
of
do.
animals on the road. And for some
Yes.
reason, I said, you need to slow down for this next curve. And I got around that curve, and there's a dozen deer on the road. And that's the only, but I don't usually believe in that kind of stuff. I try not to be um, a believer in cults and different reasons. The simplest explanation is oftentimes the answer to these things, and I don't go way off. But on Laments for the Dead, to give Peter those kind of um, abilities moves the story along.
It
So
it does. It was beautiful, and it just makes him
thank you.
so real as a character too.
Yeah.
I loved him. I want a whole book about him. Does he have his own
Um, I don't know if
book?
I could write a whole book about him because he
No?
goes back, obviously he returns to
Yeah.
the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
but um, I don't know if I could pick it up but it would be interesting to go from a young man during the Soviet Union in the 80s and now pick him up in 2025 and say, what are you doing now? So,
It would be, and having him know what happened in this story. So you said that you didn't know how this was going to end.
I did not.
Let's just say, I would say that the ending of Laments for the Dead is controversial.
A little bit, yeah. Not for me, but for some people, yes.
Could it have ended any other way? Had you did you think about different ways when you got there? I mean,
I wrote, I
obviously,
wrote, I wrote two different endings,
okay, all right.
and I had to choose, and it was hard. It was very difficult.
I bet. And so how, and for listeners out there and authors who are working on their craft, how do you decide if you know that there could be two perfectly fine ways to end a story?
Um, I don't know if I recall exactly how I did it, but I do know that I stewed about it for a month or more. The book was done, and here's two endings. Where do you go to with that? And like I mentioned before, if I reformatted it, I might put the second ending in also, not in lieu of, but also. And
Oh,
it
okay.
would work. It would work.
Okay.
And so I may do that. It's the one book that I really like this. I mean, this was out of character for me. I mean, I didn't. This is not my personality to write about recent young men or anything like that. Um, but I was able to stretch myself to write it, and the way it turned out, I was very happy with it. But again, even to this day, there's times when I go, oh, I'd still like to, and go on from there. So,
All
and
right.
I
Uh,
might.
I would be interested to see how you would meld some other possible
I
endings.
can get together with you, or
Yeah.
we can talk sometime on the phone or on Zoom, and or I can send you the other ending. Um,
We could talk about that for sure.
yeah,
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 I would be
and I would
interested
like
in
it
that.
would be interesting to get your opinion as to whether it would work if I included the other ending. I don't think I would.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So
Okay. All right.
yeah,
What should readers take away from Laments? And again, this is a complex, intricate story. Um, who's your audience? Who should read this and what do you want them to take away from this?
um, most of my books and this one too, my audiences are not young people. I'm not a middle teen. Mine are mostly set for boomers because they would remember the time.
Yeah.
They would remember how difficult it was in the 80s when Ronald Reagan had labeled the Soviet Union as the evil empire, how difficult a situation there was. We all know about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but there was another crisis in, I think, 1984, where the United States and the Soviet Union came very close to going to nuclear war. The Soviet Union had gone almost as high on their DEFCON preparation as possible, and it took a double agent who was living in London to get in touch with the right people to tell the United States and NATO to back off of the war games that they were doing.
Mm,
That
that was
they
a
were
yeah.
to let the Soviet Union know that this was not a first strike uh, preparation. This was simply a um, a war games to prepare in case of something like that.
Yeah, I was a brand new second lieutenant then. Oof. Ugh.
Were you
Well,
in Korea at that? Were you in Korea at that time?
I wasn't there. I did a team spirit exercise in Korea in 19, when was that? 89. I went over there for three
Okay,
months,
okay.
and that was interesting living in
So
tent
you know about
cities and
the Walt Kramer and his what Korea was like and how cold it can be and how
oh
desolate
yes.
it can be.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. That was
yeah.
I've written a few things about that.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us about On Point and some of your basketball stories as a
Okay.
basketball coach.
I've got four, and I just started was going to write one, and I really was never going to write basketball, even though I had coached it for 35 years, and I coached boys, not girls. Well, um, my younger son was working as a professor of literature and grammar and punctuation rhetoric in Birmingham, Alabama, and
Okay.
he was one of the people that I would send my manuscripts to uh, just
Lucky to
make some
edit.
suggestions.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, he was also my 3 year point guard as a high school kid.
Ah,
So he was steeped in basketball, and he still is, as I am. But he said, you ought to write a basketball book because, um, you know a lot about that.
yeah.
And he said it might be fun other than just writing about historical fiction. And so I did, but when I'm here in Leadville, it was 2011 or something like that. And I had just gotten a call from Mike Bager, and that might be a name that you
Yep,
remember.
I
Anyway, he
remember.
was the
Yep,
activities director.
yep.
And he called me and he said, I understand you coach basketball. And I didn't know Mike. And I said, yeah, I did that for a long time. And he said, well, can I buy you a beer? Well, I was in, you know, anyway, he said that the girls coach was pregnant and due during Christmas, and he wanted someone there that knew basketball just in case she had any complications. Well, she never did. But in the conversation with the activities director, I said, I'll do it for 1 year, but I want the junior varsity because I don't want to just be standing there in case
Yeah.
nothing happens and I'm just, standing there.
Right,
And
right.
well, I had 8 of the most wonderful little girls in the world, one of
Oh,
which had some basketball skills,
one of eight.
and one who was a bigger girl with great athletic ability, who told me on like a second or third day, she said, I don't know anything about basketball, but I'll get every rebound for you. And so I write the story around those 2 kids and a coach or an old man, kind of like me, in the sense that I was there, but
Mature.
it's not a biography or anything like that. Anyway, and how they bring about funding and interest in a girls program in a small town where that was an anomaly, where the girls were an afterthought.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
yeah,
And the girls are mostly Hispanic, not all,
yeah.
but mostly Hispanic. You see that a lot in mountain towns, especially in small mountain towns, and they don't know how to argue for themselves for what they need. And so the girls that I had on that junior varsity team had never won a game in junior high or high school.
Oh,
And from your time there.
teaching
And
there,
so I
yeah.
had these junior varsity girls who were kind of athletic and quick. And I had one little girl who could really play, and she becomes Molly in this, Molly Rascone. And then I have this big girl who's got some violence in her life.
Ah,
And you read about that in the book.
yeah.
And this coach is able to get a book club. His wife is a member of a book club, and she says, this isn't right. They need to have nice uniforms. They need to have some traveling money for food or stuff like that. And so a book club adopts them in a sense, which is like the we've got some money for you. We'll help you along the way. And it takes off from there. Anyway, I write the first one, and it was very well received, even though I don't promote anything. And
Yeah.
so a number of people said, you wrote that about their junior year. What happened about their senior year? So I wrote a second one somewhere here, which is called Gifts, and the cover changes. It goes from a girl
Okay.
to a cheetah.
Oh, I like
And
that.
these little and the book here is called that you're looking at says one team on point says one team's journey from minor girls to cheetahs, their growth
Ah,
there.
all
So,
right.
yeah, and that too. But they they're both meant to make you cry a lot, and I got that a lot from my readers, that they were very sentimental, very inspiring, and I hope that that's the message that I gave in that. And then I had some readers said, "Gee, I wonder what happened to them now." And so I wrote about Molly as a
Hoops and seeds.
yeah. I Molly is now 40 years old.
Ah,
in 2020, and
Okay.
she is coaching a university team in the San Joaquin Valley of California. And it
Okay.
is a very mixed group of people. And she has got a real good team, and they're going to the tournament, and COVID hits.
Oh,
And then you remember,
no.
COVID canceled the NCAA's.
Yes.
And so
Yeah,
the
it did.
story, while it's basketball, a basketball team, it's not basketball. It's how does this coach and her assistant basically guide these girls through COVID until the restart in November. Um, and I was very fortunate because I was able to contact four university coaches who just opened their hearts to how difficult that was.
Oh,
Um, Two women and two men. Uh, it started with the University of Pennsylvania coach who said, I don't have those problems because my girls were Ivy League girls, and so they were taken care of in a lot of ways.
oh,
But the Arizona State University coach who had worked with the Navajo on the Navajo reservation because it's close,
mhm.
and that's why I contacted her because I have the point guard in this book is a Navajo Dene.
Okay.
Um, and if you know anything about basketball and Native Americans, they are obsessed with basketball. From Alaska to Florida, from Arizona to Maine, the reservations are obsessed with basketball, boys and girls. And they play
Wow.
what's called res ball, which is wild and crazy and wonderful.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
but
Okay.
anyway, Molly is now the coach of this, and she has to take care of them. And I had these four coaches who were willing to just open up and say, "This is what happened," and how some successes and some not successes. That not all of their girls handled it very well or survived
Yeah.
this very well.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it was a different for me, but it gets back to the same thing. There's still a social problem that's I was dealing with.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of research in that.
Right.
I had to travel to the Navajo reservation. I had to do some other things. I didn't tell you that when I wrote my first book, The Hill, that we were talking about,
Yeah.
when I finished it, I had alluded to a kibbutz
Okay.
in on the Golan Heights in northern
Okay.
Israel.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure what I said about it or how I described it was right. So when I finished it over spring break, I jumped on a plane and went to Israel for a week to see if I could, you know, um, verify some of
Valid. Yeah. Validate some of your say.
and it
Yeah.
was it was eye opening and but it's hard with what's going on today in Israel to write about to not bring that into to a book that's set in
Yeah.
67
Yeah.
and how that works. So
Right. Right.
yeah, yeah.
So, what are you working on now? I mean, it's it sounds like you're working on a ton of stuff.
Um,
what's your main project right now?
because I just got this one published, the Hill. My two characters in my next book, which is right now called Three Ponds, but that's
Okay.
just the location and it won't be the title of the book. But for discussion's sake, we'll call it Three Ponds. Three Ponds has a lady named Winky uh, who's very wise about the world and doesn't like people a lot. And she's probably somewhere between your age of 50 and my age of 78.
I'm 66,
I
Roger.
know, I know.
You're so funny.
Okay, you're holding up better than I am, but I'm, 78, and so I have to be careful as to how I do some of these things. But my research is on the characteristics of old people and some of the things that, other than just from my own knowledge. I mean, I'm very lucky. My health has been good. I've
Yeah.
got a good set of friends up here in Leadville and a good set of friends in Arizona, and plus my colleagues in Greeley who I dearly love, and we keep in contact. So I'm very blessed in that sense. And so I don't want to write about us specifically, but that'll creep into the book too. But right now, I'm just trying to get a lot of information about the quirks and characteristics of old people.
Specifically women?
The No, there'll be a couple of men, but um, as my younger son says, "You're really good at writing about women. How do you know this stuff?" To which my answer is, "I research." But
Well,
so
that's a really funny question because, oh my gosh, when I wrote The Hair Raising Truth, which is my naughty fairy tale, I had people asking me, "How did you get into the head of a teenage boy so well?" And I'm like, "Really?"
There's nothing there. It just rattles around all the time.
How could I not get into the head of a teenage boy when I
Yeah.
had two myself and was in the army? So
Well,
that's
and
it.
you were also a teacher for quite a
Yeah,
while too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
So that was just kind of funny.
yeah.
So, Roger, we have many authors and writers out there who watch my show. What advice would you give them about anything about writing, things that you've learned
The first thing I would tell them is don't be a critic early on.
of your
Just
own
write
work, of
of
your
your
own
own
work?
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to read, you've got to do everything, but every day you sit down and be disciplined about it, you know, whether it's an hour or a number of pages. But I would say don't worry about the time. Make sure you get a page or two or whatever your goal is done every day. And then don't throw it away at least until you've followed that page up with another half dozen. And then if it doesn't work, then go back and change. But fill up a page every day. And a lot of it will be crap, as we know. Some of it won't work. So I can write a whole book and it didn't work. But that's what I would do. Just enjoy it. I get up, I feed the cat, make the coffee, sit down, and I write.
Yeah.
And it's quiet. I've got my view of the trees here in Leadville. I've got a little piece of property, and so. But it's your time, and don't squander that by having family duties or scheduling things when it's your writing time. And you
Put the,
can't always do that,
do you have a
but
do not
it's your
disturb
time.
sign? Yeah, you
Yeah,
have a do not.
and I yeah. Um, and for some writers who are in their 20s and 30s, that's hard to do or
Yeah.
have a family. But I didn't start writing until I was
Mature.
2003, 50, yeah, in my late 50s. And so it's always worked that I don't have distractions for the most part.
Yeah.
And those distractions will uh, derail a book or
Mm.
what you want to do because they don't allow you to keep a train of thought. So
Yeah,
uh,
we're fortunate, you and I think.
we are,
Yeah.
and I know a little bit about your family and your husband, and we're supported in what we do, and so
Hmm.
we'll go from there.
And again, when we're more mature, we have way more experiences
Yes,
and to draw from.
and
So
we do, and we do,
so don't
and
be in a rush.
well, yeah, all our books say this is fiction, that these are not real people, but they're come close to what real people in our lives have done, and so we go from there.
Yes, yes, and yeah, many times, yeah, there will be characters in your life that may spice up your novel in certain ways, and then yeah, that's what
Yes,
we draw from. We draw from not only what we know, but what we can imagine,
yes.
and from in my case, what I dream about.
Well,
Crazy dreams.
I talk to my characters all the time, and my wife is constantly saying, "Who are you talking to?" And I'll say, "Oh, I'm talking to Walt Kramer or Paul Garrity or Peter. Peter. What would you have done here?" So,
Yes, and do they surprise you sometimes? Have you ever had
well,
like
like I
big
said, I write by the seat of my pants,
yeah, yeah.
and I've gotten so they don't surprise me so much as that they just lead me along the right path. That this is the direction the book ought to go, and for that, I don't know if that's what most people do or not. I mean, I know people who use outlines, just have and know where they want to go. I don't do that, and so
I rarely do either. After my Water White book one was completely pantsed, completely. And I continued to dream, as I was writing it. Book two, if you do a series, sometimes you have to plan a little bit because you have to remember what you've done in the first book. And then, so there's a little bit of, yeah, a teensy bit of outlining I did for my second book. And then my third book, I totally pantsed. So, yeah. And the one I'm working on right now,
yeah. Well,
2183. This is my proof copy.
I saw
Um,
the yeah.
it's I am now on my final edit of
How long
it.
you been? How long have you been working on that book?
5 years.
Wow.
5 years. It started as my husband said, you should write a military romance. Well, this is not it, but I've had people ask me when I'm going to write about my West Point experience. And I said, I don't want to write about my West Point experience. It's been done and I don't want to go back there. But then a very good friend of mine, Linda Ditchkiss, she's also an author here down in Salida, she said, why don't you set a military academy in the future? And I thought, oh, I can do that. I
Yeah.
could do that. So it's set 200 years after I graduated from West Point, and it's fun, and I'm loving
Sounds
it.
sounds
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just started posting. I have my first two chapters up on my Substack account. If anyone wants to go to my Substack account and read
Well,
my
good.
first two chapters, so that's how I'm going to do it. But it'll be out before the holidays. Thanks for
Good.
asking. Yeah.
I've got one more um, thing that I do.
Uh,
Uh, I've got an idea book,
okay.
and it will surprise people what it is. It's a little book by Nathaniel Hawthorne, I think is his name. He wrote The Mayflower and a number of those sailing books.
Yeah.
Anyway, he wrote a book called Why Read Moby Dick, and it's only
Oh,
110 pages or something like that. And when I start any new book, I get a brand new copy of Why Read Moby Dick, because Moby Dick, which is not for teenagers, because they would not want to read a million pages that wanders through,
all the different
the
whales.
the history of America in the 1850s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whaling book, but it's much more than that. And
Yeah.
as he points this out, for me, it's my idea book that when I start it, it talks to my new characters that I'm referring to. So I've got 11, no, now 12 copies of Why Read Moby Dick that are all marked up, but it's my idea book. And if you've got a book that you really like, an author that'll tell you how to write or give you, I don't know, quotations or something to inspire you, um, keep it close by. Or when you're stuck for a minute, just say, I'm going to go back and take a look and see if I have a note in that book or something that I did.
And
But
and Lamott's Bird by Bird. I'm on my third read, I think, of that. Yeah, there are some
I've
great.
got a copy here and a copy in Arizona of Anne Lamott. She's wonderful.
She
And
is wonderful.
Bird by Bird is wonderful.
It
It's an
it
idea
is
book too.
it is an idea book, and it's also a very grounding book.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah. Why read Moby Dick? Oh my gosh. I've tried twice, Roger. I've tried twice
But you don't have
to
to read
get
the
through it.
book. See, the
I
thing is,
well,
for me, it doesn't say you have to. I have to go back and read Moby Dick, and I read it in my 20s or 30s, and I really enjoyed it at that time. But I've got a copy, but I'll look at it occasionally. But the little book he explains things and just goes off as to what Hawthorne was doing when he was writing that. So
all right. Well, I'm going to have to at least get that and read that. Our youngest son has read Moby Dick all the way through. He's
good for
32
him.
now. I think he read it when he was 30, and I'm like, oh, now I feel embarrassed. I have not
You
yet
don't have to. I mean,
through.
another word of advice for old people like me,
Mature.
for old folks, if you're reading a book and don't like it, don't read it.
Yeah.
Put it down and find something that you like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amen. Life is getting
too
shorter and
short now.
shorter, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and there's so many good books out there.
Well, Roger, my listeners out there, my guest today, Roger Johnson, his books, well, we talked a little about Laments for the Dead
That's a good place to
today.
start.
It's a good
Laments for
place
the
to
Dead
start.
and
Yeah.
On Point are good places to start, if
Yeah.
depending
And
on.
and bunches more. I will have links below to Roger's books. And do you have a website?
Uh, I do, but it's down kind of at the moment because I don't like it, and
Oh,
I'm
mine needs to be down.
I,
Mine totally needs to be down. I
yeah,
decided I needed to update it and I hit a new theme on it and it's all messed up.
yeah,
Don't go to my website, anybody. But
yeah.
please like and subscribe, hit that like and subscribe button there. And if you want, you could even buy me a coffee for what I do here if you enjoy these. Roger Johnson, keep being awesome and safe travels to Arizona tomorrow. Are you leaving tomorrow?
Yeah. Sunday.
Sunday? All
Sunday
right.
morning, right? I think we're going to skirt the rain. I think it's going to be okay. As you've looked, Buena Vista, Salida, Alamosa look like we're going to be dry for the most part. And, what they were saying earlier is kind of missing us. So should be
All
okay
righty. Well, be safe and keep writing. And let's talk about maybe re-releasing Laments with a different ending.
with an additional ending.
A digital ending. All right. All right. Roger, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.